Hello everybody. The best and effective rule for learning to speak English is very simple, yet very powerful. In fact, I usually say this is the most important rule because this is how we all learn language as children. It's such an easy thing to do that you have to wonder why most English classes do not emphasize it more. And here it's clear. Learn with your ears, not with your eyes. That's right. If you want to speak excellent English, you have to read? No. You have to write? No. You have to speak? No. You have to listen. Listening, and more listening is the key to speaking excellent English. If you listen a lot, what's going to happen? I will tell you. If you listen a lot, you are going to learn vocabulary. If you listen a lot, you will learn grammar. If you listen a lot, you will get faster at speaking and you will understand what people are saying to you. And you know what? You will do all of this in a more natural and enjoyable manner. You remember we talked a lot about, imitation method, that I've said to you, you will have to imitate the process that the babies and the small children use to learn a language. Once I read an academic research on language learning, it says that listening is the biggest factor in overall language ability, particularly in the early stages. In fact, this is true even if you don't understand most of what you are hearing. Why? Because this is how babies learn their first language. Again, remember the process used by the babies and the small children? Babies learn through listening, right? They do not study grammar rules. They do not use textbooks. They do not take tests like you do. Yet, small children master spoken English, including grammar. It's very surprising, right? In fact, experts says 80% of your time studying English should be spent listening, even after you are no longer a beginner. I know it sounds a little bit strange. Unfortunately, most traditional language classes do not emphasize listening. So probably, if you studied English in school, right, you probably learn mostly with your eyes, not with your ears. And I still observe many English classes in my country here, in Azerbaijan, they're all the same. Most English teachers, I don't know, is it right to call them teachers or not? Whether in the middle school, in the high school, university, private school, the majority of them. They focus on textbooks in the classroom. Yes, there may be some short communication exercises, but the entire class is defined and driven by a textbook. Yes, if your goal is to get a degree in English from a university, let's say, this is a kind of a great way to study, right? If you want to get an IELTS score, things like that. But if you want to speak real English, these kind of traditional methods won't get you there. Why? Good question. Because even if you study for many years, you've basically learned English analytically, right? You learn to think about English. You learn to talk about English. You learn to translate English. I think you also know, a lot about the grammar rules. In fact, I guess you know more about grammar rules than the most Americans, most Canadians, and most British people. You know why? Because native speakers do not study that stuff very much. Because native speakers, they speak real English. English conversation, real English conversation. Real English conversation is different. Why? Because native speakers learn to speak English with their ears by listening, and listening. That's why, and that's what you must do if you want to speak English quickly, automatically, and naturally, just like a native speaker. And the most important factor for learning English It's what Dr. Stephen Krashen calls. You remember this guy, right? My favorite one. He calls this as a comprehensible input. Comprehensible. In other words, it means understandable input. So input here refers to what is coming into your brain, right? You know that in any language, you get English input in two ways, through listening or through reading. Yes, certain kinds of reading are very useful, they're beneficial, it's very powerful, I can say. However, the most powerful kind of input for learning to speak is not reading, it's listening. And the comprehensible, understandable input methods have been shown to be more effective than traditional methods. What is traditional method? Like grammar study, drills, exercises, speaking practices, And the research shows that speech happens as a result of listening, okay? So listen carefully. So this is very important. Think of babies and children. What was the first step of them? Reading? Did they start to speak English with the help of reading? No. Listening was always the first step. No child starts talking before they understand through listening. They're always listening for a long time until they understand a lot of language. And then, only after then, not only after then, but only then, do they begin to speak. And this listening, silent period, right? So this is the silent period. They did not speak. They just listened. This is the silent period. It's vitally important to the process of natural language learning. And another property of the natural language learning is that, I said, like a speech, this is the speech, right? It emerged from listening. Guys, speech, or the conversation speaking class, as the many traditional English classes emphasize, speech is not a skill that is consciously practiced or taught. Rather, after enough understandable listening, a child will just suddenly begin to speak. It seems to happen by magic. Why? Because, as I said, speaking ability, it grows out of the listening ability. My favorite researcher, James Crawford, he has found that speaking English is a result of listening, and that English fluency frequently occurs from listening alone. He states that English learning is an unconscious process, and while it's happening, we are often not aware that it's happening. And he just gave a great example. He said that you can think of this like a seed. Seed in the ground, right? A seed in the ground. The seed is the potential for speaking. It's always there. However, the seed needs water in order to grow and emerge from the ground. And likewise, our brains. Our brains need a lot of understandable listening for effortless speech to emerge. And as you might imagine, because children spend so much time listening before they speak, their listening ability is always higher than their speaking ability. In other words, children always understand more English than they can actually use in speech. So next, as you use the listening first approach, here you will experience the same thing. Your listening ability will naturally grow faster than your speaking ability. I know that some learners worry about this, but it's the natural and the correct process. Another way to think of this is that, that listening leads to speaking and pulls it along. It's like listening is like a balloon and a string tied to speaking, right? As the listening level rises, it pulls the speaking ability up, and they go up together. But the listening ability will always be higher, okay? This is quite natural process. I hear many students say that I can understand written English perfectly, but I cannot speak. I hear this a lot from students who don't understand why they have a great comprehension of written English, but they cannot speak it well. One reason is because English conversation is quite different from English reading. Conversation uses a different type of English, including different vocabulary. English conversational vocabulary is much more casual. In English, this means we use more words of the Saxon or Old English origin during this conversation. We also use more phrasal verbs what's the phrasal verbs? 2 or 3 words, they just with either a verb or an adverb or a verb and adverb, or preposition, such as, like get away or calm down or cheer someone up, So the difference between the conversation and more formal English is the one reason that even advanced students have difficulty with everyday conversations. And the problem is that students learn more formal English in school. And formal English tends to use more words of French and Latino origin. And this kind of English is in fact much easier for students who speak, Romance languages such as Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, French, and I think our language is likewise. And these students often do quite well, when reading English, but they have a lot of trouble understanding normal speech. So, if you want to communicate with native speakers, it's very important to learn from English conversation and audios, not just textbooks and reading. This is why listening is so important, because listening provides the foundation for speaking. As I said, as your listening ability improves, it will pull your speaking ability up. Unfortunately, too many learners are focused solely on speaking, and they neglect listening. However, what use is speaking if you can't understand the other person? For now, I think it's more than enough. But we will continue this topic in the next upcoming podcast series. Bye-bye.
Self-study paketi barədə ətraflı məlumat əldə etmək üçün bizə müraciət edin.